Well, season 12 has wrapped, and wowee, what a finale. Today, Whovian and TV podcaster Mr. Rob McKnight joins me to dissect it all.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is the 8th season of a Trekzone Conversation with Matt Miller.
Well, he's here with me once again, Mr. Rob McKnight, Aussie TV podcaster, Whovian, massive Doctor Who fan. How are you, sir?
I'm really good. I'm excited because finally I'm liking Doctor Who again, and I can't say that's been the case for the past couple of seasons.
It certainly has been a roller coaster ride, and this is the third time I think that we've had you on the show with this season, and it really has been, even this season has been a roller coaster of emotions with what Chibs has been doing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like the standard stories haven't been that great, which is pretty much like the first season of his. But the ones that deal with Time Lord lore, I feel have been really, really strong. And I am a big fan of the finale. But I still come down to, there's lots of issues to explore here. But I still come down to, in the 30 seconds that we saw the other Doctor, she was far better than Jodie. I think Jodie has grown a lot this year. But when I see the other Doctor, I'm just like, that is the Doctor to me. You know, she owns it. She is the character. Jodie, from the get-go, has always seemed not in control and too try-hard, actually.
It certainly has been an interesting take on the Doctor and where they've been taking her. It certainly hasn't been that stoic and confident Doctor that we've seen in the past. Even so much with Matt Smith, that I think was sort of a half Jodie, half David sort of Doctor, in that he's a bit goofy, but he still owned that role and still had the confidence and the presence to carry the series.
When he was bumbling, it was all fine, but then when he'd turn it on, he was in control and he was the Doctor. It's like, you might take me for a fool, that's fine, which is very Patrick Troughton, really. But when I am in my moment, when I am in my element, I am the Doctor. And I feel that we haven't had that with Jodie's Doctor. But then we get this other female Doctor who has just completely owned that role, that when she changed characters, when she went from human to being a Time Lord / the Doctor, she turned, she owned it. And that's the difference here.
And it's certainly, I mean, Jodie's brought a character to the screen, whether it's the Doctor or not, I guess is sort of open to interpretation, and a lot of people, even here at Trekzone, with Keeley loving everything that Jodie's doing. I don't think it's taking away from that, but is it necessarily the Doctor as they should be?
Well, this is a really good question, because we've had different incarnations of the Doctor, obviously. We've had different actors bring their own qualities to the role. I think one of the problems is being the first female Doctor, although in the canon now she's not, but from what we knew at the time, she was the first female Doctor. I think in an effort to try and not have the Doctor in full control, it devalued the first female Doctor. All of a sudden, she can't steer the TARDIS correctly. All of a sudden, she's not the leader. You know, it's more of a flat structure. You know, they probably needed to go with a harder, more defined Doctor as the first female Doctor. Jodie could have worked down the line. But I think as the first female, you need to set boundaries that this is not a substitute Doctor. This is not an inferior Doctor just because it's a woman. This is the Doctor. And I feel like they've lost that along the way with trying to create some drama. You know, I understand the reasons why some choices were made. The Doctor could go anywhere. There was no drama in steering the TARDIS. They didn't always end up in a random spot, where with Jodie they did do that. But how many times would we hear, I don't know, as when something was happening? And it's very rare in previous Doctors where they didn't know. In fact, I remember a scene when the Doctor didn't know. He goes, oh, that feels different. I don't know the answer to this one. You know, whereas with Jodie, every week she doesn't know something. She always gets us out of the scrape, we know that, but she doesn't know the answers straight away. And it's great for dramatic purposes, but when you're talking about the character of the Doctor and transferring that to a female Doctor, I think you're doing the female version of the Doctor a disservice.
Is that a little bit of? Is that a little bit of?
It's completely sexist, if we're to be completely honest. But you are trying to change the Doctor's narrative by saying the Doctor can now be a woman. So the fact is, a lot rides on Jodie's performance of the Doctor, because if it doesn't work, we're back to men for a very long time. Now, I think I said it on this podcast before, Stephen Moffat gave Chris Chibnall the very best present. He set up the idea of being able to change sex during his tenure with the Master becoming Missy, other Time Lords, changing sex. So he really set it up that when it came, it wasn't an issue, except for those arseholes that are out there. It's an issue for. But, well, let's be honest.
That vocal minority.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at it, though, and we go back, if you had asked me, I don't know, 10 years ago, in fact, someone did. I remember I was at Channel 9 and someone said to me, we were talking about Doctor Who, and they said, oh, could you ever imagine a female Doctor? I was like, no, the Doctor's a male. Because that is what I had always known. That had always been established. And having said that, it makes complete sense. This person regenerates their entire body. Why couldn't they be female? Makes complete sense. But at the time, you've got to remember what we knew. We knew the Doctor was a man. That's what we had. So Moffat did the best thing for Chibnall, as I said, by changing that law, showing that it was possible by using secondary characters to prove the point, so that when Chibnall did it, the Doctor changing sex to me at that point wasn't an issue. What was an issue was Jodie's performance, and made me stop and think, oh my God, maybe I am sexist. Maybe I'm just not liking the Doctor because the Doctor's now female. But it's not, because when I saw that other Doctor, I believed it. I believed her as the Doctor. And I actually would have been very happy if she had been the new Doctor. I would have been so happy with that. Wouldn't cared about black, female, whatever. I would have been so happy with that, because it was a truly Doctor-esque performance.
And it really comes down to what I was trying to articulate there was the perception and the personification that we've sort of made of this character over 50 plus years. Mm-hmm. Yes, it has been a male for so long, but as we've discovered, that's not the reason. That's not our sticking point with Jodie Whittaker as a bad Doctor or as not as good a Doctor. It very much has been, this is the Doctor character that we know. And as you say, Jodie each week saying, I don't know about this. I don't know. Let's sort of have a democratic approach to the way that we're sort of travelling in the TARDIS. It's not anything against Jodie's Doctor. It's about the Doctor as a character, and that's not who we've known. And I think that does take a little bit away from Jodie's performance.
I agree. And look, if you look at the seasons 1 and 2 with Chibnall, I think he's learned some lessons. I think he has actually listened to the feedback. In his first season, he didn't want any relic of the past. And then, of course, as soon as we came to the first New Year's Eve special, the Daleks are back because there'd been such a backlash and his new characterizations weren't working. He set up a great character in his first episode. I actually thought that first episode was a really strong episode. He'd obviously had a lot of time to work on it, and I was invested. Wasn't 100% sold on Jodie's version of the Doctor, but it was a first episode, so I wasn't worried about that. The Doctor's never fully formed in the first episode. So I gave a lot of passes, but that character that they had as the enemy in the first one, by the time they came back for the final episode, was just a joke. It wasn't the menacing character that we'd known. It was a real letdown of a finale. Now Chibnall has listened to that feedback, has gone and tampered with the Doctor's own timeline. And I've got to say, I'm an absolute fan of what he's done. He's created a mystery for the Doctor again, because the Doctor isn't a Time Lord. The Doctor is something else. We don't know what the Doctor is. So I find that intriguing and I quite like it. I'm always fond of when things involve the TARDIS and there's Time Lords and things like that. So that played to me big time. And I think they also did work on Jodie's characterization of the Doctor in that second series, and it has gotten better. Whether she will ever fully be there as the Doctor for me is another question. You look at Sylvester McCoy, even when he was being silly or he was the ultimate clown, tapping spoons and all that kind of stuff. Once again, he would get to those moments where you don't know who I don't know what accent. Well, sorry. That was me going off to attempt a Sylvester McCoy accent and failing miserably. I'm known for my bad accents. Like he was in control. At what point is Jodie in control? And even when she's trying to be in control, it's just not quite believable for me.
On this finale that we've just witnessed, we've changed the Doctor from what we thought we knew into the timeless child, and the vocal minority is out there saying, "Well, this completely destroys Doctor Who. It's jumping the shark. There's no more peril for our main character." What do you think of those sort of responses to this massive plot twist?
I'll tell you what I think.
Why give them airtime?
Look, when Doctor Who started, I'm all for the debate. I have no dramas with that. But when Doctor Who started, we didn't know the Doctor was a Time Lord. That became something established many years later after the show had started. We had the Deadly Assassin, which introduced the 12 regeneration limit and the actual society of Time Lords. The show has always evolved and changed the law of the show and the history of the show. And if you look at even during Stephen Moffat's era, we introduced the War Doctor. Now, if you want to talk about something that was unnecessary, to me, that was totally unnecessary. There's no reason why that role shouldn't have been played by the Eighth Doctor. And I still, to this day, think that was a bad choice. I know that everyone likes that characterization, great characterization, but it was so confusing for the audience. And I think that was the point where a lot of the general audience, not the big fans, but the general audience started to lose interest in Doctor Who because, hang on, he's the 11th Doctor, but he's not really the 11th Doctor, he's the 13th Doctor. It was just so confusing. Whereas this goes back even further, and there's no reason why this couldn't be a thing. Introducing the War Doctor when there'd been no reference was just ham-fisted to me. But the Timeless Child makes perfect sense to me. The Doctor has always been special. The Doctor has always been different to the rest of the Time Lords. Is this the reason why? Is this the reason why even the Time Lords, and I have a theory that only a select few knew about the true history of the Doctor, and when they rebooted her life or his life, that was within a really small confine of people who actually knew, which is why when Matt Smith was regenerating, that's why he thought he needed another life, because he thought he was at the end of his life cycle. And the Time Lords thought he needed another life. That's why they gave him the extra regenerations, which he actually didn't need, because he'll just regenerate anyway. So I think Chibnall's done a great thing, because now it set it up that it could be 10 years down the track, the Doctor could actually go and find their origins. And who's to say Captain Jack isn't part of that? We had Captain Jack make a 2-minute appearance in a recent episode, and then what's to say he's not going to come back and be part of that, which ultimately leads him to being the face of Bo. There are a lot of things to discover down the track.
It is very interesting, and the one thing that I love about all of these theories and how this completely, people thinking that this completely betrays canon and all these other arguments, and there's so many parallels to all the other franchises in the world at the moment, Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel even, that it's still this series that's in production. You're never going to know how it all fits together until it completely wraps up and is no longer being made at all. It's completely done with and put on a shelf in a nice little collector's tin. And as
how
fans,
is it destroying canon? I don't understand that argument, because
I don't get this.
We don't know what the Doctor's life was like on Gallifrey. All we know is William Hartnell stole a TARDIS and left. Who's to say, having his memory erased, he hasn't done the same kind of thing each time, but with a different Time Lord? With William Hartnell, it was his granddaughter Susan. Previously, we've seen with Joe that it was another Gallifreyan. He was trained at the academy. Remember, there's a lot of questions, I think, about her companion, who she was having, a marriage with on Earth. So I think there's a lot, and we had the other Time Lord say the one thing about training together is we know each other's moves. So he obviously trained at the academy. So there's lots of questions about him. So did the Doctor bring another Time Lord with him/her each time they left Gallifrey? Ended up in this same scenario of, in 1960s Earth, stealing a police box that got jammed. There's so many questions here that somehow the Doctor's reliving the same life and has the same instincts, which is actually borne out when Peter Capaldi's Doctor was stuck within the dial. Remember when he spent millions of years in the dial?
Oh, that's right, yes.
Reliving the same experience. And all his instincts each time were the same. He did the same thing and was smashing through the wall, which showed his instincts each time were the same. So who's to say that if the Doctor was reliving their life over and over again with their memory erased, why wouldn't they live the same kind of existence?
Yeah. It's a good point. The one thing that I loved, it was a really nice little Easter egg when the Doctor came back to Earth in another TARDIS. Its chameleon circuit was working. Yeah. Oh, sorry, it wasn't the Doctor. It was the companions, and they actually came back in a house. I thought that was it was a really nice touch, and it wasn't mentioned at all. It was just there that yes, these chameleon circuits do actually work.
They do work on every other TARDIS, and when she landed near her TARDIS, the chameleon circuit worked as a tree, and she
that's
got
right.
Out of that
yes,
TARDIS.
Of course.
And no, I thought that was a lovely little touch. And she's like, I don't want the functioning one. I want my TARDIS.
Yes.
And there's a beauty in that.
Absolutely. Well, you can find Rob on Twitter at Rob_McKnight and his podcast, TV_Blackbox. You can find me on Twitter at Merrimat86. Trekzone, all over socials. Just search for Trekzone. Rob, it's been fantastic to dive through Doctor Who with you. I love your passion and energy for the show. It's been evident ever since you were producing morning television as well. I think that's the ultimate goal for me, is to be able to bring my nerdy passion into television.
It's fun, isn't it? And you find it's interesting, a side note, a lot of Doctor Who fans have gone on to work in television and the media, and you see it. People running the show now, Russell T Davies was a Doctor Who fan. And so there's something about this show that unites people into wanting to be on the creative arts and making television and being part of that process. So there is something special, and I think that would be true for Star Trek fans as well, that there's something, we get how television's made. We get the use of green screens and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think there's something that unites us all in our love for the shows we love and the way they're made and television in general.
Fantastic, Rob. Well, thanks for diving in with Trekzone over this season, and we should catch you when this Christmas/New Year special happens.
Can't wait. Thanks, Matt.